Welcome to the Six Figure Author Experiment, where we help you break through your first or next $100,000 goal. Parental discretion is advised. Now, let's get on with the show.
Let's talk comic book adaptation, Russell. I might just have you take it away.
Sure.
I can tell people I wrote this book. I was in my second trimester of pregnancy, and there's a lot of hormones raging, and channeled it all into this book that is 99% spice scenes. Somebody said, oh, you can put the audiobook on YouTube if you take out the spice scenes. It's like, that'll be 2 pages in this book. And there's a lot of emotional movement and plot happening, emotional catharsis happening in it. It also is pretty intensely a non-con reluctance fantasy. That's why it's called Soul to the Berserkers. And there's the themes like she is in a very awful situation, but then it turns out great. That is very cathartic as a fantasy. And it works for me. And apparently people also love to read it. So I published this, and it really was a book of my heart. And I wrote it really fast. It's very short, but I also was just in the zone creatively because, those pregnancy hormones allow you to be actually very just wide open creatively also. So yeah. And then I wrote 14 more novellas in the series in the world because I was fascinated with this world. And I started thinking about this world when I was a teen. And in college, I thought, what are the werewolf myths from around the world? I started Googling and researching, and I realized there's werewolf myths all over the world. And the one that fascinated me the most was the Berserker myth in Norway, where these warriors would probably take mushrooms or eat fermented grain or get really drunk, and they would fight without clothes. They would go berserk. So it was a verb, just like going a Viking was also a verb. And that's how they got their name. And it could come from bear skin, meaning naked skin, and it could also come from wearing a bear pelt, like a bear skin. That is the etymology of the word berserker. But yeah, there's a lot of spice in this. So Russell had to adapt this. And I sent it to you with no expectations. And you were like, oh, here's a script for your comic. And I said, oh, are we making a comic? Is this happening? And it did.
Well, you wanted to start a podcast, and I'm a great enabler. This is the thing that I do better than I'm a great writer. Don't get me wrong. I'm awesome at like business coaching, but like I'm best at enabling people to do to do the things that they want to do. And so I was able to like play Magic Genie to Lee a couple of times in this thing because like I have a very weird cross section of skills that range from website design to writing comics and to a whole bunch of other weird stuff. And so I had done this comic Death's Kiss with Melissa Storm 2 or so years ago, and we had published it through Laguna. And when Lee was like, I want to make a comic, I'm like, great. She wants more comics by women for women, or at least like for neutral gays. It's really like for neutral gays, just like not for male gays. And I was like, we introduced Willow to her. I introduced Lee to her. We did a couple of other, like I've been working with her to like on other non-sexy comics, but if someone says I want to do something and I have the ability to do it with like in my skill set, and like I'm probably just gonna do it. It's why I don't let many people ask me things, because I'm just gonna do that thing for them. And so especially like my number one love language is gift giving, and then second is acts of service. So like you can just imagine what kind of human, someone asks you to do a thing, you just are like, all right, I can do that in like a day. That sounds fun. I like comics. And I don't have to like I get to like go off and go into La La Land and like do other stuff while everyone else is making a comic, and I just get to see pages. Amazing. So this book was written in like 2015-16 timeframe, right, Lee?
Yes.
And so the first thing is it's been 10 whole years. There's been like a whole bunch of whole bunch of stuff has changed in the past 10 years of like what is consent. And so the first thing I we had to think about was there's a couple of places in here which in this book that feel good reading, but look less good. Oh, I'm trying to like parse my words
You
here.
definitely
Like they look less good visually than
yes.
they do having read them.
You softened it because the book is from her point of view, which so is the comic. And she's having a great time. It is, like I said, non-consent reluctance kink, and it's pretty intense. And it's about someone in a terrible situation who gets all the love and orgasms she could ever want or need, which is a great fantasy. But I'm able to write it. Russell said, you can write this book. You could produce this comic. We actually had some women, very talented women artists, step away from the project because they said it's a bit too spicy and the non-con element or reluctance element it's not something I need in my body of work when I go to get a job at Marvel or DC
Sure.
to do Wonder Woman. And I completely understand that. And that's why I love being an indie author is I can write exactly what I want. And Russell, I do appreciate that you softened this and made it, like you said, more for the neutral gaze versus Lee Savino has this really spicy fantasy and just threw it up on Amazon and then had a baby immediately after and then was like, oh, people like this book. I like this book. I'll write a bunch more. And I would write this book differently today. It would definitely be longer because I have more time on my hands. And I'd probably have a lot more of a poly feel. I'd have the swords crossing and I'm a different writer and it's a different time and so yeah you needed to adapt it not just from one medium to another but also softening the story so it's more palatable and
Well, yeah,
doesn't
and
stop.
there's certain things which like sound hot when you read them. But if you're actually looking at an image of it, you're like, oh, I don't want to look at an image of that though. Like that's not a thing that I want to like. That's not a thing I want in my brain. It's just like it gives really good vibes. Like you're like Sword of the Berserkers gives really good like horny vibes. Like it's fucking great at like fucking stuff. Um and like if Lee said actually I want that thing in there, I would be like, okay. But like the main thing that I asked was like this is supposed to be so I did a lit RPG recently, and they were like, "This is a male power fantasy," and I was like, "Oh, I need to rewrite this whole thing then because that is not the vibe that I had for it." And like, this is kind of like a woman power fantasy, and so like, it was about how do you take that part and carry it through and make it true to the thing, knowing that like probably if that book was written today it wouldn't you would have written it differently as you said slightly like probably like 95% the same but like maybe just like taking maybe making it like a slightly or maybe you wouldn't have I don't know
I
but like
don't know.
what
I tend to write very intense non-con and here's why a lot of women have a lot of people no matter the gender they have fantasies of the worst nightmare turning out okay. For example, a Marvel movie. We don't want aliens to attack New York and raise it to the ground. Nobody was but it was very empowering to see images that actually reminded me a lot of 9/11 and
right
then watch the Avengers kick butt. That's so empowering. And in the realm of your intimate physical life, you can have a lot of fears about what might happen if something was taken from you without your consent. And then if you can turn your brain goes, okay, we'll take that and we will relieve this fear by giving you something very cathartic. And I love that. I crave it. And I believe a lot of the readers here are like, yep, that's
sure
me. That's why I love it. And it's okay for it to be that. I do think it was great how you made it more playful. You made the language more modern. You definitely kept in the scenes where they're being good. Basically, they need this woman to do all this emotional labor, and she does. And they give her everything she's ever wanted. And they protect her and they do all the things. to hold the space for her. And I really think that's exactly what I want from a masculine type person is, I can do the magic labor. My friends and I joke about magic couch as a trope, which couch stands for COOCH. And then autocorrect made it magic couch. But she heals him with the power of her pussy. Okay. And that's really empowering and that's really amazing. And that's happening in the comic. It we just you softened the non-consent reluctance
Well,
elements.
the other half of it is so we made it the idea behind these comics is romance readers plus not safe for work comic fans equal money. Like equal like maximum
Yes.
and so like it was partially just like are comic fans going to what do those comic fans want as opposed to like which is and I think that all these comics that we do with Laguna is like that's the main thing. It's like how do we bring in this thread that honors romance readers and gets them excited for comics, and then also gets comic fans excited to like go buy all of these covers and go do all the things they're going to do. And again, like there are even a Marvel movie is very empowering, but like they're not showing all of the things that happen when an alien invades, right? Like they're showing the empowering imagery of when an alien invades. And that is something that I think about when no matter what you are when you're trying to turn a book into a comic, like I think it is a good idea. The biggest thing that I caution people besides don't do more than like one book like one issue of book first to make sure that you like it is do the things in comics that are uniquely good in comics and keep the things that are great in books great about books. So comics that are written by book people tend to be a lot of exposition. Like they tend to be a lot of sitting in a room with two people, which is great for a book because like
It's about
you want the dialogue
and
to
you want the
be
interiority. You're
right. You
in
want
the character's head. Yeah.
yes, but like you don't have to do that in a comic because they're going to see that they're outside. Like they're going to see that the things are happening that are happening. And there's a bit, so people get comics wrong all the time because I'm trying to pull one of my comics here. This is a good one. That's a very violent one. It's okay. Americans don't care about violence, just sex. So this is probably going to be fine.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
there's a thing that happens. Do you see in between this panel? This is called the gutter. This white part is called the gutter.
Yeah.
And while in romance landia, having your mind in the gutter is good. In comics, it's equally good because your goal is to tell your brain, is to get someone's brain to imagine what happens between the gutters. So let me see if I can explain this slightly less crazy. Um, so what most people who are doing comics think is what are the four images that give the most words or like tell the story the best. But the thing is, this white page again is called the gutter. And what your actual goal is to pick the pages that start playing a movie in your reader's head so they imagine what happens between these panels. And all of comics, if you want the trick of comics, it is people who are great at comics are great at getting readers to fill in the gap between these two things and start playing the movie. So you can see that like there's a like this is him walking and then he trips. There's not the in between. You are playing that. Then someone gets grabbed. You don't see the between there. And so all of these bits are to get you to extrapolate what is between these two every panel. Does that make sense, Lee?
That does. And I have to say, I was in a writing rut, and that's why I went to a comic book shop. And the proprietor at Alpha Comics in Richmond, Virginia was awesome. And she said, I walked out with a stack. She gave me tons of recs. And I noticed I read very fast, and I couldn't read the comics very fast. I had to slow down, and it
Yes. So
hurt my brain a little because
this is another thing. If you are not big on comics already, do yourself a favor and go buy a book called Understanding Comics. And it's by Scott McCloud. And otherwise, what's going to happen is you're either going to read the words or the images. And then you're going to finish the comic and be like, this doesn't make any sense. I don't understand. This is what everyone whoever's ever read a comic and dislikes it basically thinks. Once I'm like, no, it's the interplay between the words and the imagery. Like it is how they work together and play against each other and play on each other that like makes a comic make sense. And that book, Understanding Comics, don't bother with the Making Comics unless you want to make comics. It's also a great book, but the Understanding Comics is like from a reader's perspective, and it's written in comic form. So like they actually go through and show you how to read these two things together, and it is a skill. And similarly, the reading between the gutter is also a skill because I actually think romance is great because a lot of romance pages are vibes. You can tell
it's
me
a
if
vibe.
I'm wrong,
No,
but like,
it's emotional movement forward.
right. It's like one of the biggest problems with romance people do in comics is they take, and I say this with all the love in the world, but like there's a lot of like nonsense sentences and statements that are like done in like a chaotic field that just is supposed to make you feel things, but like they're not necessarily meant to be like read. Like this is, I think, the Twilight problem. Because like I think Stephanie Meyer is great at like doing these like vibey things that are between it, but like if you're reading it and being like, this was all nonsense. I'm like, no, dude, it's vibes. It's all vibes that are supposed to like get you in the right emotional frame to like get to get hot or do whatever this thing is. And in the same way, comics a lot of the times are vibes and letting it like flow. They both take the ability to like let it flow over you and like let the emotion out. This is my very brief experience, but like I pretty consistently have seen this in romance books, especially in people who are taking the romance books and making it romance comics.
I rip through books so fast,
Mhm.
reading, and it's almost like get her done. And that's
Right,
not how you read a comic. You slow down and you take it in. Like you said, you have to take it in. I mean, you just have to let it flow in, and you're just going to the deeper part of your mind, the unconscious mind, which is actually where you want to be because that's the part of your mind that processes emotions. And when you're having an emotional experience, the reason we love stories is not just for information. We
right,
we actually learn more when stories cue images in our mind and create emotion.
right,
It's not
exactly.
about data. And
Yes,
so, yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I think that like romance really embraces that like emotional more than any other
yes. And I'm going to
genre.
say this because I was really high last night and I thought all this up and I want to say it. In our culture, especially under like patriarchy, emotional labor isn't considered work, isn't considered labor, and isn't protected. Think about how we pay nurses and teachers and social workers, right? Or daycare workers. Emotional labor, it makes our society run, but it is especially put on people, women, people assigned female at birth, to do all this free labor. And I didn't know about, I'm learning about this now, but I've lived this, right? And if, you're a human, especially in America, you feel this. I was at my alma mater where I studied creative writing, and I very proudly wrote romance novels there. And I proudly read romance novels because any book I read, I'm always looking for the romance. And I told my friend Mary, who I hadn't seen in a long time, I said, I'm writing romance novels. And I had told some other people and made a bunch of dirty jokes, and they were kind of like, oh my God. But Mary looked at me and goes, my mom and dad have been married for 20 years, and he isn't good at sharing his emotions. And she reads romance all the time. And I think that her having romance novels and having the emotional catharsis allows her to remain in the marriage. It allows her to basically survive life as someone who's expected to do all this emotional labor for people assigned male at birth who tend to be trained to be emotionally stunted. Anyway, that's a whole nother TED talk. But I just will say, if you read romance, you can notice like how it does heal you, how it is vibes, but it's emotions, and emotions are so valid. In fact, if people had a lot more ability to deal with their fear and their anger and their rage and their discomfort, we wouldn't have war. So it's vitally important. And yet romance is really looked down on. And everyone looks down on something like genre fiction or whatever. Stephen King feels like people look down on what he writes. Whatever. But if you read romance, there's a reason for it. There's a craving that you have, and you are fulfilling a need that you have. And also, you don't have to do emotional labor for the men in your life. Just saying that.
Wonderful.
Okay.
I mean, I agree. Seconded, but like that that is really important when you think about like how to translate a book.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of this comes back to how can I make a comic that plays the book for you in a way that is satisfying so that it starts playing in your mind. To go to the like technical part of it, a page has somewhere usually between four and six panels on it, unless they have one. I mean, they have any number, but like sometimes they have one, like that's called the splash page, but usually it's somewhere between four and six. Maybe it goes down to seven or eight, up to seven or eight. But usually somewhere between four and six, and your job is to find the four to six panels on every page that play the music, that play the movie in somebody's head. I think of it a lot like in animation they call it keyframes, which are like the main things, and then everything else is the in-betweens. So like my job is to find the keyframes that lets you play the in-betweens and do it in a satisfying way that like moves the story forward with each panel. And that is not the goal of writing books. A lot of it is emotional and like sitting in things and like character development and all of like it's great if you wrote a book that can play in somebody's head, but like the that one chapter of Lee's book, even though they're short chapters, is probably longer than the entirety of the comic book script that I sent back to her. And so the question is, what was it, 30 pages? So what's 30 times 4? 120. I have 120, 100 to 120 images that I get to tell Lee's 35,000, 40,000 words, whatever the amount of words that it is, maybe 16,000, whatever the length of the book. You basically get a very, 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 very small fraction of time. And to go back to the first thing, it's not like I don't think there's anything wrong with Lee's book, but like there's a complicated relationship that happens in a lot of the non-con stuff in the book that just in 120 images is not enough to like feel deeply and explain appropriately. So like my job is to say which of these elements are going to play the movie. Actually, it is a little bit like Wuthering Heights, the new movie, which I loved. And I don't care if anyone else hated it. Like I loved it, even though it's the first half of the book. But she says, like, I want to you to I wanted to watch a movie of what I thought I saw at 13.
Hmm.
And it's like not the book. It's like what a movie does really well, which is like imagery and metaphor and allusions and allegory and all of those things. Um, and there was a ton of that stuff, whether you liked the movie or hated it, and it was very pretty. But there's just literally not enough space in even a 3 hour movie to tell Wuthering Heights. It's just not. Like it's two movies minimum. And even if you break it up into two movies, they probably aren't going to capture the things that happen in the books. So you have to say, okay, what elements am I going to carry forward into this other medium and do the thing that this medium does the best?
Yeah,
And
I agree. Like when I when I think about a film adaptation, I'm like, this is a different vehicle. Do
right,
not, build a BMW and then, you know, this
right.
is going to be a Learjet. It just is going to be different.
And I have done it the opposite way too. So if you go and read my book, Death, the first, or actually if you read Black Market Heroin, I think I did. Okay, so I wrote this book Magic, which is free on all platforms. And the first book, Black Market Heroin, we turned into a comic first, and then I wrote the book for it afterwards. And there's all sorts of extra stuff that I added to the book because the comic, like told the whole different story. And it didn't, and it what did, and comics aren't great at like settling on places and letting you have like deep philosophical conversations, and they're terrible at interiority. So like when I turn, and I've done this many times before, turning a comic into a book is often about expanding all of the parts that make the book work really well. And why I think I'm a good person to translate that back into books is because is because I've done it both ways. Like I know what the skill is to do both sides of that equation and to translate from one way to another and on either side. And like just Katrina is way more loquacious like in the book in her book because like she can be. There's maybe 1,000 words in the whole Katrina hates dead shit, and there's like 120,000 words in Death. And the same thing happens and then I have other books like Ichabod Jones Monster Hunter, which cannot be a book. I cannot do it, with at least not in a way that is has any interiority, because you're not supposed to know if he's in the apocalypse killing people and thinking they're monsters, or if it was all in his head the whole time. And so it's a book that's a comic that literally would not work on as a book, because the entire conceit and the whole thing that we play off of is whether is this like thing. And so if you were in his head, or even if you had someone commenting on what was there, someone would know, like whether it was in his head or not. And so when you're talking about how to translate, the main thing that I would say is like get your head in the gutter, and also think about what the medium does right. And don't be so precious about cutting things, because the good of comics is action and visuals.
Hmm.
And books aren't good at visuals because they're just words. They're good at hallucinating, making you hallucinate and getting you to like talk in other ways. And I have seen so many so many comics translated from books that like they take all when a dynamic book becomes a static comic, it's because they just keep playing the old hits constantly. And there's like, oh, well, like this scene worked in the book, so I have to make this scene exactly the same. And I will say that if you read Magic, in Magic, Ollie has a magic eye that allows her to see through illusions. And one of those things, one of the big illusions in the world is that like people with like magic and monsters use amulets to like control whether people can see them. And in the comic, I just made everyone the monster they actually are. In the book, it doesn't make sense to do that. But in the comic, because it's so visual, saying, oh, she can see through the veil to other things and then not showing those other things doesn't make sense because the visual medium. Does that make sense, Lee?
Yeah. And I love thinking about it that way because, yeah, basically don't try to get the book to be a comic and don't try to get the comic to be a book. It really is a new creation. And when you handed me the script, I was like, yep, character names are the same, vibes are the same, setting slightly different, but still mostly in the same, it's in the same world. It's just, it's in a better location for the visuals. And the scenes are, what helped, I think, I'm really not precious about this because I wrote this and had a baby and then I had another baby. I don't remember. I don't remember anything. I've reread passages and gone, oh, I love this. And I remember writing this. But a lot of those brain connections are gone. So when you came and said, here's the script, I was like, holy crap, I have a script now. And I really wanted to respect it as something, what it was. I do want to talk about the people involved and the mechanics of this and some of the money and how someone could get started doing this. But
Sure.
that was really excellent. That was probably the most useful thing for all the authors here who are thinking about just taking their IP and their work and, seeing it in different ways.
Awesome. And there's an article on Hapitalist. If you go to hapitalist.com, that's like the 5 mistakes that author. I think I sent it to you before we started working. We did a comic. I wrote it when Melissa and I were doing it, but it's the 5 biggest mistakes that authors make when they translate their stuff into comics. And that's also good. But yes, let's talk about the actual process of doing this. Can I just, before we go through like your half of the process, I will say that a comic issue is usually somewhere between 20 and 32 pages. It is usually somewhere between 4 to 6 panels a page. And then there are covers. The one thing that's relevant for authors is the stack that I recommend you think about is comic, special edition book, art prints. And in order to make those things work, one of the things you should think about is how many splash pages you want on a page, like in your book. So, like if you want to have 6 or 7 illustrations, well, your book's probably going to be more like 30 pages. But then you can take those single page illustrations and put them into your book as custom illustrations. And then you can say, I want these 7 things available also as art prints. And so you can use one thing 3 different ways. And if you are doing it the way that I have been coaching people to do it, you'll be spending a good chunk of money. These are not cheap books, but you'll be able to use the same art in multiple ways. I recommend at most you do 5 splash pages, 1 page for every five, sorry, 1 splash page for every 5 pages, or 1 page every 10 is like more traditional, and then you'll probably have a 25 or 26 page book. So like those are just like the mechanics to think about as you're going to write your script is like, okay, when I run this campaign, I'm going to have art prints, custom illustrations inside the book. I'm going to make one of the covers for the comic a special edition for the book, and then I'm going to have the comic itself, and then I'm going to have four or five different covers, and I'm going to have we call it nice, where it's no sexy times,
Hmm.
naughty, which is sexy times, and then probably some sort of metal or holographic print. If you do it right, you should be able to find artists who can just make the same cover, but just do like a costume change where the person has clothes, they don't have clothes, and that'll save you a considerable amount of money when you look at having all of these covers done. Because once you have a cover, then you get to be like, oh, can you just make her new? Can you just do another layer and like make her sexy times and make her have a cup clothes on? And they charge you considerably less for that, and you get multiple extra value. You look like you want to show them something. So that's my half. That's of the technical bit.
This is a splash page, but I have to, it's like the most not safe. It's, I don't know. It's hard to cover up all the pastrami. But
Sure.
I was gonna say from my end, Russell made so much happen because Russell introduced me to Lori at Laguna Studios. Lori sourced the artists, and I put the link in the chat. And it's in business, it's often who you know, not what you know. So if you're really interested in this process, please reach out to both these people or find a way to respectfully approach them. And this would not have happened without Russell. And then Lori definitely worked her network and worked really hard to find the artists who would be willing to do this project and do it in a beautiful way. I did have a considerable budget for this project because this was a book of my heart and this was a project of my heart. And if you don't have 15 grand lying around to invest in this, again, people do Kickstarter to raise that funding. We're lucky enough that we could have most everything is done and you'll be able to get the comic for sure and a lot faster. But you could start by gathering art, and you can work with Laguna Studios and ask them to help you source artists or work your own network. And you can get splash pages. And then throughout this book, I put as much of the art just dripped in here. It's mostly not safe for work, which it fits the book. And I put the Step and Sedgwick cover at the end, and it's just really cool to see all the art in the paperback. But again, you could source artists and just do, like Russell said, a number of splash pages and then put them in your paperback. So now you have a special edition paperback, and that could help you raise more money towards getting the comic done. I do think you can do the comic for less money. We just were very
Yeah, I mean, I did like most of my books are somewhere between $100 and $200 a page. Obviously, it's like more expensive probably now, I would expect, but like, yeah, you can certainly source it for less. The higher end books are going to be the ones that raise a lot. But what we talked about with Lee is, let's say that no one responds to the comic, which we don't think is going to happen. Do you think they would respond to a special edition illustrated book with a new cover? And so if you're thinking like, oh, well, I don't know if I can drop this, well, if you're doing, that's why if you get 3 bites of the apple, art prints, custom illustration book, comic, it's like, okay, now I'm amortizing this cost across multiple modalities.
yeah.
And I will have a special edition book that I can like sell at conferences or on my website as well. As opposed to what generally happens is people say, I don't have money for the custom illustrations for a special edition book. And you're like, yeah, but like, if you're doing a 25-page book and you have five splash pages, then those ones are also going to be inside of the book. And some of the panels might also be inside of the book. So you're actually like not, you're actually paying for the custom illustrations once and you're using it three times. And then when you have the covers as well, if you have four covers, you have four, that's 10 pages of illustrations. You're not probably not in a, I mean, Lee probably has like 50 images in hers, but like you don't need more than like five or six illustrations in a book. And then you just are, so if you're like, I have five or six illustrations now, can I fill out 15 more pages and like make it a comic? Because then you can reach the comic market and the romance market. Sorry, I keep coming back to this strategy bit, but
No, that's
like
great. No, and I wanted to offer strategy. I don't have 50 images in here. Maybe I should get 50 images in here. So
maybe you
we'll
can
find
make that one of your stretch goals. We're going to add more images to the book.
Yeah. I really want an image of Brenna with her kids and her berserkers. A family photo, as someone said, a family portrait.
Sure.
So, yes, watch this space. But yeah, if this is really exciting and intriguing with you for you, and if you are an artist yourself, follow Russell because he is an artist and has done, his own sort of
Sure.
illustrations and things.
May I show something?
Yeah.
Okay. So many of you are in Capitalist, and I know that like some of you, I see a couple, at least a couple of people who are like, well, how do I actually do the Kickstarter bit and the comic bit? If you go to capitalist.com/resources, you should just like join at either the $100 a year or $300 a year level, but you can come up here and search for anything about Kickstarter, and that will take you to most of the places. And then we have in Capitalist a book on Kickstarter, which has the templates for like designing your own page and everything in it. We have there's a lot of a Kickstarter launch pad with like 40 hours of stuff in it about how to set up and think about and plan a Kickstarter. And with multiple launches of like I did pages for like I think three or four of my launches and I just like recorded me doing it. There's a direct sales launch pad which shows you how to take a Kickstarter and make it a series landing page or like on put it on your web store. There is there's a bunch of other stuff down here. I think there are email sequences from my Kickstarter campaigns that you can just use. And so like and then there's a workbook on all of the Kickstarter stuff. So like if you are in that space of like wanting to do a Kickstarter and maybe you are even in Capitalist and you did know all of those things exist, then like I have been doing Kickstarters. There's also a course about how to do a comics anthology on Kickstarter, which I think is another great option for writers. And all of that is available to like much for free. All of the information, all of those courses are available to our lowest paid tier. And then you get unlimited access to WrestleBot, which is trained on all my material and a whole bunch of other stuff, including breakthrough sessions. I'll announce here first. In May, I'm going to be doing a Kickstarter cohort where we're all going to go through this together. So we're going to all launch a Kickstarter in June. And like you can be one of those people if you want, or maybe you don't want. That's fine. Maybe you're just here because you're like a great reader. But if you have just listened to me be like drone on and on and on and on and on about all the Kickstarter stuff, and you're like, I really want to do that, then like it is available for you. There's just so much information that like I have compiled over the last years. I even did a bunch of in the Kickstarter Launchpad course. There's a bunch of page breakdowns that I just broke down, like Joanna Penn's campaign, and a bunch of other ones. So just like do that.
Do it. And I do want to say, from my point of view, it was interesting for me to learn about different artists doing different covers. We already covered that. One artist doing the interiors, the way they turn in the pencil sketches and then say, how's this? And then they do another layer and then they do color. And then someone else typically is the letterer and does the text boxes or the
Yes.
POW, BAP on the Batman comics. That's a,
Yes. And generally the biggest problem that people have is they hire a shitty letterer after doing a bunch of really nice art and it ruins the whole book.
I did not know that.
Mm. So,
Rowan, does this process require a book or a book series? Could it just be done with comics? So just a comic script, you mean, Rowan?
oh yeah, I mean I started in comics. So like all of these books were done before I did any novels with books. So like comics is a great Kickstarter market. It's maybe the best Kickstarter market. We're just like amping it up by also having the book and the audience and such. But like, yeah, man, like I started my career in doing Kickstarters and running shows and like whether you're doing safe for work books, not safe for work books, if you're doing a comic and a book or you're just doing a comic. In fact, all of the methodology in my books was built from my experience in comics and translating it into the book market. So, yeah, man, you can definitely do this with just comics. I would just say try to make the raise more reasonable. Like I would not say spend $15,000 or I don't know, $12,000 on your first book. The thing that Lee didn't say is like she has more than broken even on this series many, 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 many times over. So like investing more money is great when you have that. All of my series have broken even many, many, many times over. So it's a lot easier for me to be like, yeah, who cares if I make a comic and I don't raise the money? Like I've already made X amount of money on this series. So like I'm willing to take a gamble. If you are not on that end of the spectrum, then it's absolutely possible to do and raise a lot of money and do a really great job. But don't spend 15 grand on the
Yeah,
on an
don't do
issue.
that. You don't need to do it.
Yeah.
And if it's safe for work, you're probably going to find artists that you really like who, I mean, we went with, I think, really top tier artists. So.
Yeah, we did. Like that, and that's like what we paid for is we know that certain artists were popular in Lee's community, in the comics community, and from doing previous campaigns with Luca. So we were like, okay, if we hire these people, then they will deliver an audience. But like what I say is like you can probably find someone really good for $200 a page. If you're paying more than that, then you're paying for their audience or for their like name recognition on Kickstarter. So like Stefan is like a huge name on Kickstarter. So like his stuff will just like fly off the shelf. So like that is a very expensive get, but like you want to have those if you need to raise that money, like you're going to get that amplification.
We wanted all the art. The
Yeah,
art was
and
important to me. If I was going to do this, it's going to be incredible art that I could wallpaper my house with.
right. Well, and that's how we did with Death's Kiss too. I work with Melissa Storm, and it's like similarly, like she was a top tier. She's like a seven-figure author, and like she's like, I want to do a comic, and I was like, great, I will do a comic with you, obviously, because like you're going to bring an audience, and we did a great campaign for her too. And we did a book and the comic. So it's yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible. I would say that Kickstarter, the high end of Kickstarter is really skewed to the not safe for work stuff these days. But like there's no reason why like I raised 25 grand on this book, the Pixie Dust book that I showed you, this book. And like, this was several years ago. What I recommend actually, Rowan, is if you can put together a comics anthology first, gather a bunch of comics books fans, which is what I did with Monsters and Other Scary Shit, and then the Cthulhu books. I did that, and then I basically put out an anthology with an Aaron Alexovich cover that was very similar to this book. And then 6 months later, after I delivered that book, I ran this campaign, and it was like its own, like it just like worked because I had a bunch of people aggregated in an audience.
Yeah,
And then,
you
yeah,
built
so like all of
momentum.
these little creators, myself included, made a much bigger audience. And then, like, I was able to use that to transition to my own work. And
So
so, if you,
yeah, go on, finish.
no, that's it.
All right. I was gonna say business advice, don't take yourself out of the game. Don't spend more than you can on any given project. Do as much as you can with your time and your efforts and your network as possible. Just don't take yourself out of business. Like don't do something that would irrevocably mean, you can't do comics and you can't do what you love anymore. Find a way to protect that and know that everything builds. So Russell just described exactly a way to build an audience. And you just said it's a Kickstarter funnel. Every Kickstarter is going to build on each on itself because you're going to bring people who are interested in the last one forward, and it grows and grows and grows. That's how I built my career on Amazon. I wrote books, they got some attention. I wrote 14 books in the same series. Every single new book lifted the rest of the books in the series. If you didn't find me in book 1 in 2016, you had another chance to find me with book 14 in 2023. And they're all the previous books are there waiting for you. So don't take
Yes.
yourself out of the game and know that you can build this momentum, and it'll take longer than you like, and then it'll happen very quickly.
Like, try not to pay so much for a Kickstarter that you like either can't break even, or like it will be so hard to break even you'll hate your book by the time you break even on it. Like, try to do something that like is the best you can do with the money you have. So like it will cost money, but like I firmly think that you can make a book for like $2,500 that's like really good, maybe like $3,000, or and like, yes, you'll have to go to shows to sell a little bit more, or yes, maybe like you invest that money into your career, but like any book that you put out, you're going to be talking about for 10 years. Like I'll bet Lee would be giddy if we went back and said you're still going to be talking about this book 12 years on and have a comic about it now. But like, that's also wild. Like, how many things you did 12 years ago do you talk about like at a regular interval that aren't humans? Or like your house. I don't remember anything I don't talk about any of my clients that I had 12 years ago, and yet these book things are things that just follow us along. So yes, don't get buried underneath it, but don't also cheap out on it, because you will, like, if you have a career, this will follow you throughout your career. And I think one of the beautiful things about Sold to the Berserker is like it holds up 12 years later. I mean, not every word of it holds up in a comic form, but like it still holds up. People are still coming into that series, like Magic and that series and Ichabod, I still talk about to this day. I still have new readers that come in. So just like make sure you're not like, you don't think that it was not the only thing that people talk about. Lee's done a lot more impressive things than that one series, but like it's going to be a part of your oeuvre. And when you have an oeuvre, you want to be able to look back at the whole thing. I can look back at every project that I put out, even the very mediocre movie, and say, I'm proud of this. Like I did the best that I could in that time. Like I didn't like make it like it is old and kind of tacky, but like it still has its charm.
And you
Yeah,
appreciate it. There's a lot of
absolutely.
gratitude for the experience and then the what was produced, the result. So
Yeah. All right, we ready to get out of here? We've been like half an hour long. I can see you yawning. Do we?
I know. It's after my bedtime. Thank you, everybody who showed up. Thank you, everybody who's backed already. Thank you for everyone who is supporting us in your heart, even if or have read the books in the past. Any bit of support means the world to us because we are creative people. And the only reason we would show up on Zoom or come out of our cave is because we really want to share what we've done, and we are so excited to share it with you, and to have people who appreciate it and enjoy it is amazing and beyond our wildest dreams. And I would not have dreamed. I was like, this would be amazing as a comic and a show on Pornhub. And so now I have my dreams coming true. And yeah, watch this space. And
Yeah,
please
what?
click these links in the chat and continue your own journey. And follow Russell if you want to do comics because he's the man.
Yes, and please join our cohort. It's gonna something people have said for two or asked for a couple years, and I'm finally bringing it back. So, yeah, thank you so much, Lee.
Yeah, I hear my kids storming the castle, so I have to
Yeah.
leave my fortress of solitude that my husband built for me.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening. For more, head on over to sixfigureauthorexperiment.com for archive access, resources, and more. We'll see you next time.